All right. Well, welcome everybody back to Country Drive Podcast. If you like the episode, please hit like and subscribe. I would appreciate that on YouTube. And honored to introduce the man of the hour, Dillon Weldon.
Glad to be here, Taylor. I appreciate you having me on again. It's been a while since we did our first podcast, but I'm thankful to be on again and thankful for our friendship. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and obviously you don't need me to plug and promote you, but I do want to make sure people know you're probably already fans of Dillon if you're watching. But follow him on YouTube because on top of the great content, there's a lot of great podcasts coming up.
Yeah, it's exciting. We do have some good ones coming up. I've done a lot the past month that I haven't edited yet and put out. Dwayne Allen of the Oak Ridge Boys, Tristan Tritt, Grayson Russell, just did Kelly Lane yesterday. So lots of fun podcasts coming down. Don Goodman, who wrote Old Red. So yeah, I appreciate that. We have a lot of really cool guests coming down the pipeline.
I have to tell you real quick, your podcast has really grown since the first time you were on here last year. Mm-hmm. And man, T. Graham Brown, T.G. Shepherd, you've had some just amazing episodes.
Yeah, when I was on last time, I guess I had started it already, but I really didn't have much out yet. But it really has. I've been thankful that a lot of folks have wanted to come on. A lot of country music legends, not just singers, but songwriters and other folks that I think it's just really important to get those people on and hear their stories and have it documented. And it's just been a lot of fun. I've made a lot of really great friends. T.G. Shepherd and Miss Kelly they're just wonderful people. T. Graham, all of the guests that I've had, I can't say a bad thing about a single one of them. They've all been really great folks and really good to me and have helped me grow the podcast and really believe in what I'm doing, which is just so special to me from those folks who, I mean, frankly, I grew up listening to those people. So it's really special to me to have their support.
Yeah. I just saw the news that Jamie Johnson has a new album coming out that he cut at Cash's cabin.
You're telling me. I hadn't even seen that news yet. I've been busy cutting up some. So I'm traveling back home this weekend. So I've been busy making content for my trip. But no, I have not seen that news. His last album was fantastic.
Yeah. I think we had talked right around not too long after the album came out. But yeah, I saw it, and he recorded some of the songs or all the songs at Cash's cabin.
That's not surprising that he's done it there. I'm pretty sure he's done quite a bit of work at the Cash cabin. And I know he had a big hand in the new Johnny Cash album that we got last year, that they did a lot of the production and stuff there at the Cash cabin. But yeah, if he's coming out with new stuff, I'm glad to hear the news. That's really exciting because his last album, I thought it was the best album of last year. Now, Beyonce won the best country Grammy last year, but I think Jamie might should have got it because it was a really good album. I enjoyed it.
You think so? You think definitely better than Beyonce, or is there like any argument?
In my opinion, yeah. I mean, the whole Beyonce thing. I know everybody's probably just as sick of me as hearing about it, but it's just a thing of, was it country or was it not? And she said it wasn't, so I don't think it should have been a contender at all. In that, I'm not saying it wasn't a great album. I'm sure there are a lot of folks who that might be their favorite album of all time, and that's fine. But it just, according to her, was not a country album, so it took away from folks who should have won that award. And I think Jamie should have. I don't even know if Jamie was up to win it, but that album was just so great. I loved his. I've been waiting for years for Jamie to come out with something, so I was super excited.
We're one day past Cash's birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Mr. Cash in heaven.
Yep. Hard to believe that he's been gone for so many years. Him and Waylon died, I think, like a year apart, and it just doesn't seem. like they've been gone for as long as they've been gone.
What's your best story about Johnny Cash?
You know, I was just talking to Dillan Holliday on the phone this morning about Johnny Cash stories, so it's funny that you bring that up. We were talking about how, unfortunately, Johnny Cash stories just don't ever do what we hope them to do on the internet. Because my favorite Johnny Cash stories, it's really two stories, but they go together so well. He burnt down the national forest in California back in the 60s. Are you aware of this story?
No.
So this was, you know, at the height of his drug use, and it's been so long since I've told it. I might get some details wrong, but I believe it was him and his nephew were out around Joshua Tree. And there are a couple different versions of how he started the fire. One was, I think, with a cigarette, and one was like a wheelbarrow that got hot or something. And anyway, he caught this national forest on fire. Well, it just so happened to be a sanctuary for condors that were, you know, I think still to this day endangered. And there were, I think, like 54 condors or something in this area that were endangered, and they were tracking. And the wildfire killed like almost all of them. There were maybe 4 or 5 condors left. And Johnny got in big trouble. I mean, it went to court and everything, and he got all kinds of fines. And I want to say in court he said something about who cares about them yellow buzzards anyway. And so he got in all kinds of trouble over that. And then years later, he had a bunch of exotic animals at the house of Cash, and one of them, he had a pair of ostriches.
Yeah.
And one of the ostriches ended up almost killing Johnny.
Mm-hmm.
It was a male ostrich that was really territorial, and I'm not going to go into the entire story, but long story short, the ostrich jumped up and cut Johnny from his chest all the way down to his belt buckle, and he said that his belt's what saved him from spilling his guts out. But it goes hand in hand, because Johnny, you know, almost took out an entire species of bird, and then a bird almost took out Johnny Cash. So to me, they go hand in hand. That's some of my favorite Johnny Cash stories.
I love it. I'm so glad that you mentioned Dillan Holliday. How special is that dude in content creation?
He's one of the best, in my opinion. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. He and I have worked together for a long time. He can be a negative Nancy a lot of times, and that aggravates me to no end, because I try to be positive. But no, he's one of my best friends in the content creation, you know, side of things. He and I have worked together a long time, and I often tell people I don't know everything there is to know about country music, and I would never claim to. And Dillan Holliday doesn't know everything there is to know about country music, and he wouldn't claim to. But you put the two of us together in a room, we can go toe to toe with just about anybody, because he knows some really obscure stuff, and I know some obscure stuff, but from kind of different eras. And so, yeah, he's one of the best. He really is. And I encourage anybody who's not following Dillan Holliday to look him up. And if you're a Tom T. Hall fan, you'll love him. But he has some really great information, and we work together a lot.
I just love that dude. I love his passion for what he does, and I just love to see his growth. I mean, he's just continually growing, and it's just fun to watch both of you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. You know, me and him became friends. He was following me years ago. He's followed me probably just about since the beginning, I guess. And somebody had commented on one of my posts wanting me to tell the story behind Long Black Veil. And I'd missed the comment, and he sent me a private message. I'd never talked to him before, and he said, "Do you mind if I'd tell the story behind Long Black Veil?" And I said, "Go for it." And ever since then, we've become buddies, and we just enjoy. Some people think that we might be stepping on each other's toes or something, you know, who don't realize that we're friends. But I just enjoy getting the stories out to the folks. And he comes from such a genuine place. He's loved it all his life, just like I have. So he's fantastic.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, that's something about you and Holiday that I really appreciate. I love country music, but I don't know all the stories that you guys know. And I'm so glad that there's a new generation of people that are out here educating people on the stories, and you and Holiday are at the forefront of that.
Taylor, I thought I was a weirdo. I really did. I think I've told you before that when I was 3 years old, I asked for a greatest hits cassette of Johnny Paycheck for Christmas. And so when I started this, 5 or 6 years ago, I thought that I was a weirdo. I liked to share the stories of country music, but I didn't think there was a market for it. I didn't think there was a whole lot of people looking for that kind of content when I started it. And pretty soon I had 1,000 followers, and I was like, well, here's 1,000 other weirdos who love country music history. And then that turned into 30,000, then 50,000, then 100,000. And now just 2 weeks ago, we crossed over 900,000 followers across all platforms who love those old country music stories. And it has, every day my mind gets blown. Every day that I look at these numbers or go out and hear somebody who watches the videos and has enjoyed them, it completely blows my mind and humbles me. And I just love it for the genre. I love it for the genre that there's so many people who enjoy real country music and the stories and the legacy, and that we're able to keep that alive. It means so much to me to be able to do that. And through you, I've got to meet some people like Roger Murrah. And Roger told me something one day that I still think about. And we went out. I like to go see Roger every time in town. And for those of you who don't know, Roger wrote Where Corn Don't Grow and just a string of a bunch of high cotton. And so we went out to lunch together, and Roger always wants to pay. So I told Roger this day, I said, Roger, please let me pay. I said, you don't realize you're a hero to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would mean the world to me if you would let me pay for this meal so I can pay for my hero's meal. And Roger looked at me and said, well, you're a hero to us because you're keeping our stories alive.
That's beautiful.
And that choked me up right there in that restaurant. I said, man, what do you mean I'm a hero to you? You wrote all the songs that I grew up on, but to hear encouraging words like that from guys who I consider to be my heroes and legends who are legends, it's so humbling and great. And it's been a heck of a journey, man. I love it.
That is the funnest thing. Shout out to Roger. He's actually the person who taught me what going Dutch is. I told him, I'm going to buy you lunch soon. He said, we're going to go Dutch. I said, I don't know what that means, but, apparently it means both of you split the ticket. But the part of this whole thing, for the podcast with people like Jim McBride and Roger Murrah and David Malloy and Rafe Van Hoy, now when I'm driving down the road listening to 106.7, one of their songs will come on, and I'll just take a quick snap of a snapshot of their song on the radio, and I'll just send it to them and say, thank you for writing this. Everything you write just makes my life better. And that's the one thing that I love, that I have access to them just to tell them how grateful I am for what they've done.
Yeah, that's been one of the most rewarding things for me because I love songwriters so much. So yeah, getting to know these guys and help them in a way that I didn't know that was even possible. The Chicken in Black with Gary Gentry, who's become one of my closest friends, it blew up on TikTok, got hundreds of millions because it became a trend. And so to be able to be a part of something like that and to have these guys call and say, thank you for helping me. It's like, wow, I never would have expected to be able to get to that position, but it's so rewarding. And I'm just so thankful to be in the position that I'm in. It's great.
Well, you deserve it, brother. Since you mentioned Gary, I want to ask you something, and we've got to talk about it. So someone took your video of the ride and put it on their own page. Is there a lot of theft going on in this content creation space?
You know, there's a fine line. I think there's a fine line between theft and so here. The thing is, I don't own any stories that I tell. Right.
Right.
I got those stories from a book or something, and I retell them in my own way of storytelling. That's fine. So what you're referencing was someone took a clip from my podcast and posted it on their page. I'm not going to say who it was on here, but you know, and those who are there for it know. And they didn't just share it. They could have shared it from my page onto their page. They downloaded it, reposted it as their own, and didn't give me credit for it. I wasn't in the video. It was a video of Gary telling a story about the ride. And that upset me because you know how much goes into the podcasts, especially whenever you're traveling. So I traveled from Southwest Louisiana all the way up to Nashville, Tennessee, carried all this gear, cameras, lighting, everything, set this up with Gary, set all of the equipment up, did this podcast with him, split it up into clips. That one clip happened to go super viral for me. So for someone to take something that you put that much time and money into and not credit you is disheartening. But it happens all the time. You know, there's a fake Facebook page out there right now that is pretending to be me that has 86,000 followers.
Yeah, I know.
Facebook does nothing about it. It's the most aggravating thing because, you know, they're making money off of my name. And there's sometimes they share stuff that I didn't even share, like pictures and stuff. The other day they shared a picture that I would have never shared. It was of Jerry Lee Lewis and Myra, his you know, the cousin that he married when she was 13 or whatever. And Myra was sitting in his lap and he had a grin on his face and she was young. And I'm like, that's not a picture I would have ever posted. Like, I talk about Jerry Lee Lewis sometimes, and I think he is one of the greatest people to ever sing a country music ballad, maybe ever. He did some not great things. And so that one particular thing, I would not have posted that picture. And here's this person who's pretending to be me posting the picture. And I'm like, this isn't right. And there should be something I can do about it. But unfortunately, apparently there's not, because Facebook doesn't do anything. But that's the world we live in, I guess.
Yeah, I sent Facebook a report on that page and they said, you know, we're not going to remove it. So, and it's like, you're now that you're verified, you would think it would come down sooner. And honestly, what you said earlier about reaching 9, if you account for the stolen accounts, you're over 1 million.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what the deal is. You would think getting verified, you would be able to have a fake profile removed, but that's not been the case. And you know, yesterday I went on there because I report them almost every day. And I'll continue doing so until they get taken down. It might not be ever, but I'll continue to report them every day. And yesterday I noticed on their location, it says United States and Cambodia. So it's somebody over in Cambodia who's pretending to be Dillon Weldon and making money.
Imitation is not the best form of flattery in this situation.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But I do want to bring it up because I want people to be very aware of this content creation theft that's going on. I realize these stories are out there, but the way you laid it out for the podcast with Gary telling his own story, it's important. But it's also important to be vigilant about people on Instagram and TikTok that are basically just regurgitating the same stuff because they see someone else have success with it.
Yeah, you see that happen too. Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do about it. That, you know, usually in those instances, I just think imitation is the greatest form of flattery. It's hard to think that about like the Facebook page because they're actually pretending to be me and they could share something wild and it could completely ruin my career, you know. But Yeah, it's weird. So I posted a video. I forget what video it was a couple of days ago in a Facebook page, like verbatim copied it, and one of my followers tagged me in it. It is what it is. Like I say, I don't own the stories, but and I'm glad that other people are sharing the stories. I am. I just hope that when people do it, they do it in their own way, in their own style, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really all you can ask for. Like me and Holiday, for instance, we share a lot of the same stories, but usually we either dig up some new detail or tell it in a different way. We have different styles, so uh, I don't want to sit here and sound like a gatekeeper or anything, like I'm gatekeeping these stories and I told them first so nobody else can tell them. No, that's not really the point. I'm glad that other people tell them, but yeah, there is a point where some folks do just blatantly steal what you did, and
Yeah,
that's not cool. That's not cool at all.
it's really not. So, I'm not trying to pull you into a drama there, but had to mention it.
Yeah, well, it's something that needs to be mentioned because it's something that's been happening a long time. There was an account. I had a video. I don't know if you remember this. This has been a long time ago, probably 2 years ago. I had a video that I was. It had "She's Acting Single" by Gary Stewart playing in
Mm-hmm.
the background, and I was sipping on whiskey, and it said something like, "When my wife changes her profile picture on Facebook and I'm not in it, she's acting single. I'm drinking doubles." It was just a joke. And then another account, like the next day, did the same exact joke. And I'm like, come on, man. I came up with that. And I'm proud of that. Come up with your own jokes.
That happens a lot, bro. So like outside of like the content creation, I'll be scrolling through reels and I'll see something that just cracks me up, just a hilarious joke. And then over the course of the next week, I'll see like 10 different accounts on reels doing the same joke.
Hmm.
There's just nothing you can do about that.
Yeah. Some people, I guess, think that it's just easier to recycle other people's content rather than, and I'm sure it is easier to recycle other people's content than come up with stuff, because I'm going to tell you, it's not easy to consistently come up with content, especially on one niche topic like traditional classic country music. You really have to do a lot of research, a lot of digging, a lot of watching documentaries and reading and whatnot to be able to continue to make engaging content over the years. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I could see where, you know, recycling other folks' stuff could be a lot easier than doing
It's
that
tempting.
research yourself. But it's just, I started, I got on TikTok back in 2020, and that's when I
Mm-hmm.
really started the country music thing. And at that time, there was the reason was because Grady Smith had put a video out on YouTube saying that country music was taking over TikTok, and he was talking about artists. So I got on TikTok and I looked around, and Grady had posted a few videos that were like, they were really TikTok videos, kind of back in that era. People were still doing the dancing and stuff. So nobody had really started the country music type style content in 2020. And really, TikTok was just becoming what it is now. It was going from a dancing app to this new thing because of COVID, really. And so that's whenever I started. So there wasn't really anybody to recycle material from. It was just telling these. I started as a hobby telling the stories of these musicians that I love. And like I said, it just turned into what it is. So
Yeah.
I just continue on. I like pulling out those. I got a story coming out on Waylon probably in the next week that I just heard for the first time. I deep, dug deep for this one, and it's a brand new Waylon story that I hadn't heard yet. So I'm always excited to find something new and put out there for the folks.
Okay, so this is a good moment. So anyone that's watching this next week will be, early March. Just watch the video and then See if you start to see it circling around somewhere else. I have a feeling it's not out there. I have a feeling you've done research to see if it's even out there that, on the content creation side. And so it's going to be interesting to see if it gets picked up by other people. So let's all be vigilant.
I'm sure it will. No, I haven't. Like I said, this story was new to me, or at least it's one that I didn't recall. I've read Waylon's book, but it's been a long time ago, so it was probably in there, and I just didn't remember it. But it's a good story. It's a story about Waylon's childhood. I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit of it. So Waylon apparently was a bad child in school and got whippings every day, paddlings.
Mm-hmm.
And, back in those days, they just paddle you in front of the classroom. And one day, Waylon decided he had enough, and the principal came with the paddle, and Waylon took it out of the principal's hands and told the principal, "I'm going to paddle you." And they got in like a standoff with this paddle, and the football coach had to intervene. And I guess Waylon had been so bad in school that the superintendent came to Waylon and basically told him, maybe you should think about taking your talents elsewhere and dropping out of school. And Waylon did. He dropped out and, continued with his DJ career, and then went on the road with Buddy Holly. But I guess Waylon was always an outlaw.
Waylon, he's in my top 5 all time.
Oh, yeah.
What is your top Waylon Jennings album of all time?
It's hard to beat Honky Tonk Heroes for me.
Okay, that's a good one.
I'm such a big Billy Joe Shaver fan. Billy Joe Shaver is one of my all-time favorite writers. So that's one of my top albums of all time, Honky Tonk Heroes. So that one, I'm a big fan of. God, so Old Waylon's such a great album too. The old Live at JD's album is good. I got a funny story about that. So me and Grayson Russell ended up at the BMI after party last year, and Post Malone was there, Austin Post, and we went there because Post Malone invited us over there, and we didn't know that it was the BMI after party till we got there. We just thought he was chilling at the bar, and we was just going to go hang out with him. And so it was everybody was there. But I walked past Post, and he said, "Hey, you know this album, don't you?" And he showed me, and it was Waylon's Live at JD's album. And he said, "Man, this is my favorite Waylon album." I said, "That's a good one. That's an old one, that's from his days back in Arizona." Well, we sat there and we listened. There wasn't much left. But that's the one that has Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, which Waylon's cut of that is my favorite. But yeah, so Post Malone's favorite Waylon album is the Live at JD's album. So that was a fun experience to get to sit there and listen and sing along with him to that Waylon album.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it turns out Post has a deep knowledge of country, and for anyone that's questioning his authenticity in country, it's deeply ingrained in him.
Yeah, he does. He after that album went off, funny enough, one of my favorite singers of all time, and who I say is one of the most underrated folks of all time, is Gary Stewart. And after that album went off, he put on one of Gary's albums, and we sat there and everybody was just singing and having a good time. So here's me and Post Malone singing Whiskey Trip by Gary Stewart. And I'm like, I'd have never guessed that me and Post Malone would be sitting here singing Whiskey Trip. But it was a great time. He does. We talked about Hank Williams for a little bit. He's a really big Hank Williams fan. And I asked him some of his favorite Hank songs. I wish I could remember which ones he told me, but I can't off the top of my head. But it was some deep cuts. It wasn't You're a Cheating Heart or I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. It was some deep cut Hank Williams songs. So yeah, he has a deep love for country music, which made me respect him a lot. And I appreciate that there are people in the mainstream who have that love and appreciation for real country music.
Yeah, by the way, for Waylon, for me, Dreaming My Dreams has got to be my favorite album.
That's a good one. That is a really good one.
You give me,
Yeah.
Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way more blues. Long time leaving, be a long time gone. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that was really a pivotal album for Waylon's career too. Uh, Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way? Definitely a pivotal song. A song with so much meaning for the times too. Waylon had been jerked around so much by this whole Nashville sound thing, and they were sending them on tours and that didn't make any sense. You one day you're up in the Northeast, and the next night they want you down in the Southwest, and he was getting tired of it. He was fed up, and that's what a lot of that song's about, is just what was happening wasn't making sense to him. He's like, "Are you sure Hank did it this way?" Because growing up, I didn't think Hank was getting told to go here and here and here, and it just didn't make sense. And so, yeah, that's a very pivotal album. Great album. Good pick. I like it.
Based on your knowledge of the history of country music, do you think that everything that's happened basically from the 80s till now is all for the artist to have more control, is all a credit to people like Waylon and Willie in the outlaw era?
I think they had a big hand in it. There's a dark side of country music history that goes all the way back to the beginning, and the artists were controlled a lot. Even the radio stations. Payola's always been a thing too. That is something that I've always been interested in hearing about. The mafia owned 99% of the jukeboxes back in the 30s and 40s, and that's what
Yeah.
these charts were based off of. So the mafia, you could buy, back in those days, you could for sure buy a number one hit with the mafia, because that's what they put across their jukeboxes. The first thing you saw would be that song. Things have changed. Jukeboxes aren't as prevalent as they once were, but payola hasn't changed. That payola's been illegal for a long time, but it's still around. So I think it's very aggravating for artists even today who pour their heart and souls into their music, like Waylon and Willie were, to know the game that's being played, and to know that sometimes it's not about the best song or the art. It's about who's positioned better, who can
Mm-hmm.
afford to get their song up the charts. That's aggravating. So I think Willie and Waylon really set a foundation for underground guys. These, we talk a lot about Cody Jinks and
Yes.
Turnpike Troubadours and all these independent people, Ward Davis, folks like that. I always bring those guys up. And I think that Waylon and Willie, even though they weren't really independent, they laid a foundation for that of like, hey, here's the game. We're not going to play it anymore. And so that now we have these artists who they're also not playing the game, and they're giving us real country music. And so I think, yeah, we definitely owe a lot to Waylon and Willie and those folks.
Yeah, it's so interesting nowadays. Like, if you're willing to be a little less famous and a little less rich, but more true to yourself, you can really have a good career. And I just constantly credit it to the outlaw era.
And I think a lot of these people can actually end up making more money than if they went the traditional route, because what a lot of artists have really realized more recently is that I'm sitting on Music Row right now.
Mm-hmm.
All of these buildings on Music Rows, all these labels might as well be, Capital One, First Financial Bank, because they're all, just loan companies. And you might go in there and get $1 million record deal, but hey, you got to pay that $1 million back through sales or whatever. And so you might be, the money that's coming in off of your record deal, you might be getting 10% of it, and the record label's getting 90% until that $1 million is paid back. And then they're getting you to do other stuff, and it's they keep you in their pocket. And so I think that folks who have stayed independent, they're able to do what they want to do and able to keep the majority of their money instead of having to pay some loan back to a loan shark out here on Music Row.
Right. And it's almost like you have a longer consistent career. So where you might have like a big bang and a big income for a 5-year career if you play the game, if you do it your way, you have more of a loyal audience that's not going to be kind of come and go. And you might hold on to them for a longer time through touring and creating whatever you want in the future. So over the long term of your career, you probably are going to make more money.
Yeah. I used to joke and say you could drive down 16th, 17th Avenue here in Nashville and see the building shaking because all the record executives don't know what to do about social media.
Yeah.
I think social media and streaming platforms have been the biggest game changers in the music industry as a whole. Now, that's not to say that they don't have their problems. Streaming platforms specifically.
Yeah.
As far as paying artists what they're worth and whatnot. But they've also opened so many doors for folks who might not would have got a break here in Nashville who are now superstars. I mean, really. Look at Zach Bryan, he's got millions upon millions of followers, and it started off of a YouTube video sitting by a fire. And so it's incredible to see what social media and streaming platforms can do for artists these days. Like you don't need record executives. Sure, some people do need them. Some people, I'm not saying it's a bad decision for everybody. Some people, that is the way to go. That's the right decision. And I think it's a case by case thing. You just have to make that decision for yourself and weigh the pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
But some people don't. Some people don't need them at all.
Do you have a good feel for what's going on right now? Like, are you at all excited about the current state?
I am. I'm really been, just super excited to see, obviously, the skyrocketing careers of like Zach Top, Greg Clay Strays, Belle France doing huge things, who are Zach and Belle kind of doing a more traditional thing. The Strays are more of a classic R&B mixed with country kind of scent that I just love. I love Brandon and all those guys. But yeah, it is exciting. I just saw where Zach Top had his first top 10, broke the top 10 for the first time with I Never Lie. So it's super exciting to see the traditional stuff coming back to the mainstream. I think we're heading in a good direction for all the bad, for all the stuff that people get hung up on, like the Beyonce stuff. Man, there's so much good stuff going on in country music right now that's really exciting and really worth talking about. Jake Worthington's another one, and a lot of new up and comers that I've been talking to. I got some podcasts coming out, some of them that they're staying true to themselves, staying true to the music, and it's exciting. It really is.
Okay, so I asked somebody the other day about the class of 2025. I want to just ask you, generally speaking, who are the various names out there that you believe need to be in the Country Music Hall of Fame soon?
That is such a hard question for me because I've done a few videos on this. There are so many people that aren't in the Country Music Hall of Fame who should be. I think that there should be a catch-up year where a lot of these folks get in. The one person who I think deserves to be in right now is Johnny Horton. Okay. I just think that is so long overdue. The man passed away 60 years ago, close to it, and had such an impact on music. Was by all accounts one of the greatest people you would ever want to meet. Mm-hmm. And has such a great story and just has been snubbed year after year of being in the Hall of Fame. I have my own theories of why. I think because he was more affiliated with the Shreveport scene and the hayride, that maybe that had just carried on. You and I talked about Travis Tritt, who I also think should be in the Hall of Fame, who maybe is getting snubbed too a little bit because which really isn't fair because he was snubbed in the first place by Nashville. And really the people in California were the ones that believed in Travis. So I don't know. There's a lot of politics in the Hall of Fame stuff, and it aggravates me. Johnny Paycheck should be in there.
Mm-hmm.
David Allan Coe, for all the problems that he has, you cannot discredit the writing and the contributions that man gave to the genre. I mean, the list goes on and on. Earl Thomas Conley. There's so many that I could sit here. We'll take up the whole podcast talking about who ought to be in the Hall of Fame.
For me, Travis, he's a must to get in.
Yeah.
And on Johnny Horton, Keith Stegall has been Alan Jackson's producer his entire career except for one album.
Mm-hmm.
He helped launch Zac Brown through the first Zac Brown Band through the first 3 albums. I mean, he's done everything. One of the greatest songwriters ever. Between an Old Memory and Me, Don't Rock the Jukebox, etc. There would not be a Keith Stegall if there was no Johnny Horton.
Really?
Yeah, Johnny introduced Keith's parents to each other.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea about that. That is crazy. I love Johnny Horton. I got to hold a Bible that belonged to Johnny Cash. I don't know if I showed you a picture of this, but if I haven't, I'll show it to you. But this was Johnny Cash's family Bible, and he got it just a few days before Johnny Horton passed, and him and Johnny Horton were best friends, and so he inscribed in the Bible, "To my dearest friend Johnny Horton," and just this sweet inscription to his friend. And you could tell he had written it, I think, like 15 days or something after Johnny had passed, but they said he took it really hard. But you could tell from what he wrote in that Bible how much Johnny Horton's friendship meant to him. I think he's one of, we talk a lot about Keith Whitley and Patsy Cline and Hank Williams as the greatest losses in country music. Johnny Horton's got to be in that conversation as one of the greatest losses. He was not just a greatly talented individual. He was historically of honorable, great man, and I think he would have done so much good things for the industry.
By the way, we should mention, for people that are not, deeper into Travis's music and career like you and I are, when we say he was snubbed, it's more of he fought against the system. So the system has never been a big fan of helping him out. But every fight that he fought against the system was a worthy battle. Everyone always goes back to Travis talking bad about Billy Ray and that song, Achy Breaky Heart. The biggest injustice of all of that reporting was that they did not continue on to talk about what Travis really meant by that whole statement. He certainly made some comments about Achy Breaky. They didn't bother to continue reading down the article and say, where Travis Tritt said, we got something going on really good right now in country music. And I think it's going to stay good for a long time, as long as we don't mess it up.
Yeah.
And that was his bigger point. Because in the video, you had the guy pulling up in a limo. You had him playing in front of a sold-out crowd. And he's like, that's not how me and Garth and Alan and Clint Black and Randy Travis debuted just 2 or 3 years ago. We debuted with songs like, Country Club and Much Too Young to Feel This Damn Old. And we didn't have like all the big bright lights. But then once all their success took off, people in Nashville started to fabricate these artists and make them look like big stars from out of the gate. And that's always just been such an injustice that he got, wrongly accused of talking bad about another artist when he was really making a point about what he was hoping would be great for country music into the future.
Yeah. It was a silly video, though. I mean, here's this guy that's brand new on the scene, and there's like thousands of people surrounding him pulling up. It was a silly video. But
his name's on the marquee.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Travis has a funny story about that when he was just getting started. Travis's name was on the marquee one night, and he remembered I think he said he pulled into Vegas, and he was like, so cool. My name's on the marquee. He felt like he had made it. So he's walking after sound check back to the room, and he hears 2 old women talking, and they go, what time does Randy Travis start tonight? And he says that's the balloon that had been blown up for him got the air went out of it. But I mean, that's my point. Like, there was a lot of humility. You had people like Alan Jackson and Jim McBride writing that song, just trying to be somebody. You had Travis Tritt doing I'm Gonna Be Somebody. Those guys were still very aspirational in their debut. And then all of a sudden we're concocting these major figures from out of the gate like Billy Ray and not necessarily Shania. Shania had an album before she went with Mutt Lange. But I mean, we kind of, they were chasing that success, the labels were, and it was just gross in the mid 90s.
Well, let me ask you something, Taylor. What is your favorite Travis Tritt song?
Oh my God. That's an impossible question to answer. But anymore.
It's really not for me. I'm sure it is for you, but
you know how you'd have to say, like, what's your favorite cover of Travis's? What's your favorite ballad? What's your favorite Southern rock song that he did? His blues songs. But I think if I had to narrow it down to one, it would be Anymore. I think that is a perfectly written ballad.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
But if you know Travis's life story and what he went through and the happiness he found with Teresa, and now they have 3 beautiful kids, it's hard not to choose More Than You'll Ever Know.
Yeah. Mine would have to be my most listened to song by Travis Tritt is I'm Gonna Be Somebody.
Oh, it's the best.
That song was always, there's not a lot. There's only really 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm Gonna Be Somebody and Chasing That Neon Rainbow that you can just listen to and feel inspired. It's like
100%.
And I listen to that song and I'm like, I want to go out. I'm not even a country music singer. I want to go out and cut an album now.
Now, it's funny because your favorite song, if you just had to choose one, would be I'm Gonna Be Somebody, which is a great choice. And mine is Anymore. So do you know the co-writer on both those songs is a woman named Jill Colucci?
Really?
Yeah, so we chose a song with at least one of the same writers on it.
There we go.
Yeah, Travis wrote Anymore with Jill, and then Jill wrote I'm Gonna Be Somebody with Stuart Harris.
Okay. Yeah, both great songs.
And Stuart Harris, longtime co-writer with our friend Jim McBride, who wrote Chasing That Neon Rainbow. Shout out to Mr. McBride. You're one of our heroes.
Yeah, we love you, Jim, and see you soon, hopefully. Hopefully we can get down there and talk to Jim pretty soon. And, Jim's such a nice guy. That was such a special day that you and I traveled down to the Alabama Music Hall of Fame on Juneteenth. Fame Studios. Me and Taylor, we traveled all the way down to the Alabama Music Hall of Fame to meet Jim, and didn't realize that it was Juneteenth and the museum was closed when we got there. It was probably 2.5 hours drive down there.
Yeah, and got to go by and see the Amish. But now it was special because we all went to lunch.
Yeah.
And then we went and did this tour of the Fame studio. So it wasn't a complete bust, but then we were like, all right, let's head over to the Hall of Fame, and boom, closed.
Yeah. Fame was great. I thoroughly enjoyed being there with you and Jim at Fame. It was incredible to tour that studio for sure.
Yeah. The history in that room, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's see. So I think we got sidetracked. Oh, we were talking about Travis. Well, what's your favorite Travis Tritt story?
Man, it's hard to beat Here's a Quarter.
That's pretty good.
That story's so iconic, and I've told it a couple times, and it always does well because people love Travis Tritt, and it's a story about a man who's reached his breaking point in a relationship. It's a true story, and I think it's funny now. I made the first time I did Here's a Quarter, I made 2 videos. I put out the original story of how it came to be. And then somebody had commented and said, man, none of these kids today know what that even means. They're wondering, what's that mean? Here's a quarter, call somebody who cares. So I made a video immediately after it, and I started it the exact way I started the other one. You ever wonder why Travis Tritt sang this? Here's a quarter, call someone who cares. But on this video, I showed a payphone, and I was like, back in the 19 whatever, we had these. They were called payphones. And it was just a funny video I did. But no, that is for sure my favorite Travis Tritt song or story. behind one of his songs.
Yeah, well, go listen to Dylan's story on Instagram about that. Just search it and find it because it's great.
Yeah. What's your favorite Travis Tritt story? I know you've got a trove of them.
Well, in a weird way, it only kind of involves Travis. All right, so I'll just plug this guy's book for anyone that wants to support our veterans. This is a book by a man named Will Chesney, who is a member of SEAL Team 6. I just happen to have it sitting there because I keep my favorite books by the desk. Will Chesney was the dog handler on the bin Laden raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan. On May 1st, 2011, he takes off with his dog in his lap and 23 other SEALs and one interpreter, and they end up on target. They find bin Laden. They kill him. Now, there's a little bit more of a backstory here, so that's why I think you should buy the book No Ordinary Dog and really learn more about Will and his time training, working with these dogs. But back to the story. They've killed bin Laden. They get on the choppers. He used to have a dog named Falco that he worked with. Falco had passed away. After every mission, Will would listen to Travis Tritt, It's a Great Day to Be Alive. When Falco passed away, he couldn't listen to the song anymore after missions. But back to Abbottabad on May 1st, they're getting on the choppers. He's got Cairo, the dog, in his lap. He knows they have an hour-long flight back to Afghanistan. Now that they've blown up the chopper, this flight home is going to be even more dangerous.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows they're there. The first thing he does when he gets in the chopper is puts his earbuds in, pulls out his iPod, and listens to Travis Tritt, It's a Great Day to Be Alive, moments after being responsible for being on the team that kills Osama bin Laden.
Wow. That's incredible.
So let's tie this into country music. The largest domestic terror attack that's ever taken place in America was Oklahoma City. Garth Brooks sings a song after that called The Change. 9/11 happens. Alan Jackson writes the definitive song about 9/11, Where Were You? And then fast forward 10 years to the mission to kill bin Laden, and Travis Tritt's song is a part of that raid.
Isn't that something?
Country music is a part of all of America's tragedies and triumphs in those three stories.
Yeah. Yet it seems like everywhere you turn, country music, since it's become a thing, somehow has been intertwined in American history every step of the way, ever since its induction. Dillan Holliday just did a video on, the Department of Defense and the Pentagon funding country music, which is a super interesting topic coming into the 1940s, 50s, after during the Cold War. They really wanted to push it as America's music and get these patriotic songs. They, got Farron Young. He was drafted into the military, and so they sent him on these USO type tours, and Roy Acuff would do them and stuff. And that's really what funded a lot of the early days of Music Row and stuff. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. I wish I could remember the name of the professor who wrote the book about it, but I can't off the top of my head. But Dillan Holliday just put out a video on it, so I encourage any of you who are watching or listening to go check out that, because it's the military and country music have a deep connection that goes back many years, and it's super interesting to learn about that and how really country music might not have gone as far as it did in those early days as quickly as it did if it wasn't for the Pentagon and the military funding it.
I got to tell you this. So I had a woman from the CIA on named Frida Scheuer, who's one of my favorite people for the work that she did in helping to capture terrorists. But now she's a life coach. But I've learned now through knowing her, She is a huge Waylon Jennings fan, and there's something that brings me a lot of joy to think that back in the days when she was working at CIA and was having a tough day, she probably just had Waylon playing in the background while she was capturing terrorists.
Ain't that something? And you sure ain't done it this way, or I've always been crazy.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, and she sent me, you know what she sent me the other day was the video of Big Bird and Waylon singing together.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I need to do a video on that. Waylon actually, he enjoyed doing that Sesame Street movie so much that he become close friends with the voice behind Big Bird, and I think that person voiced Oscar the Grouch and a couple other the Sesame Street characters. But Waylon became good friends with that person, and I want to say, I may be wrong here, but I want to say he actually took them to some shows with them, and
Oh, really?
had like Oscar the Grouch out on stage for a couple of the shows. But yeah, he really enjoyed doing that movie, and it seems, knowing Waylon's outlaw persona, it seems out of place to see him in a Sesame Street movie. But Waylon did have a really soft spot for kids. He liked to go read to the children and stuff. So it was cool to see him do a children's movie like that and enjoy it as much as he did.
Okay, Dylan, I got to ask you something.
What?
I was battling whether or not I want to ask you this, but I think I'm going to
Uh-oh.
have to. All right, let me just pull this up before I start. Forgive the dead air. I can edit it out.
You're making me nervous.
No, but I do need you to tap in. I do need you to tap into the deeper side of your mind. I think
that's scary.
Well, I can't find this damn. Here we go. All right. Yeah, I'm going to have to edit this out. All right. So I read this headline the other day. There's a book on Elvis coming out, and I think it's called Occult Elvis. The beginning of this article is basically, was Presley a telepathic demigod who could heal the sick and change the weather?
Yeah,
Have
I
you
saw
read this
that
headline?
I did.
Okay, there are stories in this that are really interesting. And shout out to Dillan Holliday again, because he's the one that told me about the conspiracy theory about Jesse, but it says something about Jesse here. Presley claims that he received psychic guidance from his stillborn twin brother, Jesse, and he recalled to a girlfriend, June Wanaco, if that's her name, that as a boy, he would astrally project himself into the stars. And I think he had a vision of himself in the white jumpsuit. And then there's one other story here. Elvis visited a friend of his in the hospital. This guy Tillery's telling the story apparently in the book that doesn't come out till April. But his friend was having severe pain, and Elvis waved his hands over him for like 30 minutes, and the guy's pain went away. So I guess the assumption in this book is that, Elvis was supernatural. Now, we have to wonder, is this just a money grab using Elvis's name, or if there's something more to it? I'm going to have to read this book. But what do you think about someone like Elvis or any other artist that you love, like a Haggard or a Waylon? Do you think that their art allows them to exist on a different level?
I don't know. I don't know how much I believe of the book of the astral projecting and all that stuff. I think with a guy like Elvis, it's so easy for folks to put him on a whole nother level than just your average human. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people that knew Elvis,
Oh, yeah.
on a personal level, lived with Elvis. T.G. Shepherd was just here yesterday, and T.G. lived with Elvis and was very close friends with him. So I hear a lot of the personal stories and when you start to hear those stories about the artists, it humanizes them. You can get so caught up in the in the showmanship and the rumors of this, that, and another about the artist that makes them seem bigger than life. But when you hear the stories of, they're not so, the days that they weren't at their best, or the days when they were sad, or Elvis thinking about his mama and crying, and just, it humanizes them, and you start to realize these people, they were just regular people like us, and I think a lot of that stuff is, it becomes fantasy. I think Elvis was, he had his problems, but I think he was an exceptional person. He tried to be anyway, and but I don't think he was, out here healing folks by waving their hands over them. I know there's the claims, but the people who are like that, who they become bigger than life. I mean, you see people out in the crowd crying just because they're in his presence.
Right.
And it's like, sometimes you just got to step back and say, these are just normal people. And I hear a lot of stories that I've, kind of been sworn to secrecy on, about different artists who I grew up loving, and I don't want to say idolizing, but, just were really big in my life and loved. And you hear these stories that brings them down to that level. Like, these were just people who were just like us, trying to make it. But one thing about Elvis, I will say, he used to drive a truck before he got famous.
Mm-hmm.
And he said himself that while he was driving that truck, the only thing he thought about was himself standing in front of a crowd playing music. He said he thought about it so hard and so diligently that it felt real.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it felt like, you hear a lot about manifestation and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of seems like that's what happened with Elvis, because that's what he says. He said that when he was driving that truck around, that's all he would think about, was being out in front of that crowd and playing his music. And it happened for him.
See, I do believe in the power of manifestation. It's not like 100% batting average, but I do think you can tap into manifestations. But it's interesting that you mentioned, like, what you're talking about with TG kind of informing you on Elvis. Tony Brown told me on the podcast, like, he didn't even think Elvis knew he was Elvis. Like, in some ways, he was absent of even understanding how big of a star he was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But he said he's just a sweet Southern guy. So to me, he was humanized by talking about him through Tony.
Yeah.
But I do see this little part of some of the artists like Elvis that it does feel like they exist in just a different plane. How do you connect? Like, if I do a video on Elvis, because I love Elvis. I mean, I talk about him all the time. People from all over the world will comment on those videos.
Yeah.
And it is just fascinating. Waylon is another person that you'll get comments from all over the world. And it's like, how do these different people tap in to people all over the world? It's just pretty interesting to me.
Well, I think Elvis was the world's first mega star.
Oh, of course.
And there's only been a handful of mega stars. You got Michael Jackson and now Taylor Swift. I think Hank Williams was the world's first superstar. I think Hank Williams was for sure in the country music world, but I think he was the first one, because Hank was drawing those kind of crowds who were, crying to be in the same room as him, and that really hadn't been seen before him. So Hank was one of the first superstars, but I think Elvis was the first megastar. Like,
megastar,
just took it to a worldwide next level, and never, other than the military, never traveled overseas because of Colonel Tom Parker, but was beloved all over the world. It's crazy. You could go to Graceland right now and it's be packed full of people. I don't think we'll ever see anything like it again. We'll have more megastars, but being that he was the first, his legacy is just going to continue on.
So I don't know if this is true, but I did hear this other day. I'm not, some big champion for the Colonel and his work, obviously, but I did hear that just to make money off the people that hated Elvis, he made I Hate Elvis buttons or pins and sold them because they would sell a lot. So he made money even off the people that didn't like Elvis.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me. Colonel Tom was. It really depends on who you talk to too, because like I said, I've talked to people who knew Elvis or was in the circle, and even Elvis himself said that he wouldn't have got where he was without the Colonel. It's easy to speculate from the outside looking in, but for the guy who lived it, Elvis, to say that he couldn't have done it without the Colonel, who knows? The Colonel was a lot of things, but one of them was a fantastic businessman. He was a cutthroat businessman, but he was a fantastic businessman.
Well, then you just bring up a good point to discredit the book, because if he was supernatural, he didn't need the Colonel.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I mean, Elvis had his faults. He wasn't a perfect human being. A lot of people like to talk about him like he was. Nobody's perfect. There's no artist who is perfect and lived a perfect lifestyle. I think it could be dangerous to idolize people as such. I think it's important to look at the good and bad. Like in the stories I tell about country artists, I've told stories. There's stories about Waylon, one of my favorite artists, and Merle they did some things that weren't good things. I think it's important you can't just look at the good sides of history. You'll never learn that way. You have to look at the bad sides too, and to get the full broad picture of what actually happened and who these people really were.
Yeah, I'm no one to judge, so I just enjoy the music.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's really a thing of judging, as much as it is just awareness. There's so many good, funny stories about certain artists. There's also things that they did, like there's the story of Waylon and Merle, where Waylon claims that Merle stole from him in this poker game. On the flip side, Waylon was coked out of his mind, so who's to blame there? There's, like I talked about Jerry Lee Lewis earlier, married his 13-year-old cousin. That was crazy. That was not a good thing. But you can't talk about, oh, Jerry Lee Lewis was such a great artist, which he was, one of the best to ever sing country music ballads, and leave that information out. I think you need to know the artist as a whole. It's just, you can't pick and choose history. You just need to tell all the stories, I think, and that's just part of it.
Okay, since we're talking about artists that have passed, because we're getting near the end here, I know you got some stuff you got to do today. You get 3 artists that have passed, and you get to go to their concert back in their prime. Who are you picking?
Waylon would definitely have to be one. That's tough. I want to say Hank Sr. I'd love to see Hank Sr. in concert, but that leaves a third one. And there's so many names running through my head right now. I'm thinking Gary Stewart. I'm thinking Elvis Presley, because who wouldn't want to go see Elvis Presley in his prime? That would be just phenomenal. And I think you just about would have to pick Elvis. But see, I was fortunate enough in my lifetime to see Merle Haggard and George Jones and folks like that. So that's why I'm not picking those guys. Hank Williams Jr. I've seen a bunch of times, which he's still living. But if we're just going strictly country artists, though, that takes Elvis out, even though he is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Maybe Gary Stewart. I'm a huge Gary Stewart fan.
That's a good one.
To have been able to see Gary. He was wild on stage. I think it would have been a lot of fun to see him.
It's funny, like none of mine are even country. I'm like Otis Redding, Jimi Hendrix, probably Elvis.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're going non-country, Otis has to be on there.
I mean, just to hear the voice live.
Yeah, one of the best voices of all time. I love Otis Redding. If we're talking about my favorite art, my favorite genre outside of country music, it's got to be that old R&B Motown blues. I love Otis and Sam Cooke and Etta James and all those old artists. You can't beat those old songs and their
Yeah.
styles of singing. I love it.
Yeah, Roger and Jim, man, they both have some great R&B stuff too, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, brother, I know, we had this whole messed up schedule, so I'm really appreciate you coming on today, buddy. I hope you come on more and more as we go into the future. And you know how I feel about you. Go ahead and plug and promote. Let everybody know where to follow and find Dillon Weldon if they haven't already.
Just search the name. That's all you got to do. I'm blessed to be at a point where if you just type in Dillon Weldon and Google, all my stuff will pop up. And but I do encourage you to also look up Drifting Cowboy podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and we got some really cool stuff coming down the pipeline. And keep on supporting Taylor Swade on this podcast because he's doing fantastic things. One of my best friends here in town, and I'm super proud of you and happy for all that you have going on, and you've been doing just killing it. And I love you for it.
Well, I appreciate you, and I love you for what you do, buddy. All right, hang out 1 minute while this loads, but that's going to be the podcast, y'all. Appreciate y'all watching. Please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.